2:45, so let's get to it. I love the last Friday session, the late Friday session. So talk a little bit about who we are at Eucalyptus. We are an infrastructure as a service company. So we were started in 2007 as a research project at UCSB. The basic idea was this was when Amazon Web Services was first starting to take off. And there were some professors who wanted to provide that kind of functionality to the folks at the university without having to go to Amazon and pay for it. And so that seemed like a really good idea. The company was founded in 2009 based on that technology. All of the code is available under GPL v3, so if you go to that GitHub URL, you can take a look. The main strength of Eucalyptus as an infrastructure as a service cloud is the faithful implementation of Amazon Web Services APIs. So EC2, S3, IAM, and EBS are the API sets that we currently support. So the idea is that if you are using tools to manage Amazon Web Services, you can use those same tools to manage your private Eucalyptus cloud implementation. How many of you guys are using Amazon now? Any of you guys? So, right. So you sort of have an understanding of how those tools work. We've got a bunch of cloud installs, a bunch of customers. And Eucalyptus is in fact an acronym. And I know that you all have computers in front of you. I can see them. So if someone can at some point tell me what that acronym means by the end of the session, then there might be something in it for you. Or you can just be lazy and find out the answer at the end. So me, I spent a lot of years at Red Hat doing systems management, software engineering management kind of stuff. I was also active in the Fedora community for many years. And sort of at the tail end of that, we started doing a lot with Fedora and the cloud, which in 2009 when I was working on it was Amazon, right? And getting images to work on Amazon and making sure that you could build a recent Fedora image that wasn't based on a kernel from Fedora 6. We spent a lot of time on that. And so then I moved on to be the CTO of an educational nonprofit where suddenly those things that I had been working on from the Fedora project were suddenly very useful on Amazon Web Services itself. And so we had the name of our big property was OER Commons. It's Open Education Resources. And it was about 8 to 10 systems in total, both dev and production, and they were all running on AWS. And so my view and all the stuff that I'm going to talk about is fairly Red Hat and AWS centric. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about have analogs for Ubuntu and other distros and other clouds, but this is sort of the focus that I'll be talking about. I spend a lot of time talking to people who don't even know what cloud is, so all of those pieces of the presentation, we'll just leave those out because I'm assuming that if you're at PuppetConf, you came here because you know things, and so the sort of typical, what is a cloud and what is a private cloud, we're just going to leave all that off, right? There's a great definition of all the cloud terms that's maintained by NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they've got a great full definition of what cloud is and what it means and what's the difference between public cloud and private cloud and hybrid cloud and all the models and all the stuff. So if you just Google the NIST definition of cloud, that'll give you everything you need to know. So we'll move on and we'll talk specifically about hybrid cloud. Okay? Have any of you heard this term? Have any of you actually done any hybrid cloud stuff to speak of? No, the answer is of course no, because no one's actually doing that yet, right? Everyone's talking about it, but there are very few people who are actually doing it, largely because it's sort of hinky to figure out, right? Well, at Eucalyptus, we actually have customers who are doing it, And so, you know, a lot of what we're going to talk about here is some of the things that those users keep in mind and some of the problems they run into and you know, how they resolve them and how we recommend that they resolve them. So that's what we're going to talk about. You can have different loads running on your public cloud and your private cloud, but if they're not actually more or less the same workload, then you can't really call it private cloud. That's cheating, right? I mean, you can run your web servers over here and your file servers and, you know, a database or internal stuff over here, and you can use both ends of the infrastructure for different tools. But when we talk about hybrid cloud, what we're really talking about is workloads that are basically the same on both sides of the fence, right? And why would you want to do that? Well, for many of our customers, the terminology we are starting to hear over and over again is buy the base and rent the spike. As you get to scale, and we tend to deal with customers at a large scale, right? We deal with enterprise customers. When you start using public cloud at scale, you start running into cost issues. You may also run into regulatory issues where you can't necessarily run all of these workloads in public, right? And so, you know, one of the things that our customers are constantly asking us how to do effectively is, how can I take this workload that I currently have running on Amazon, for instance, and how can I bring some of that stuff over to Eucalyptus? Or maybe how can I move, you know, a large chunk of it to Eucalyptus, and then when I start hitting load, then I can go to Amazon and take advantage of their massive scalability, right? So this is a very common use case that we're talking about all the time. And so that's what we mean. And there's a number of considerations when you start thinking about this that you want to keep in mind. So the first big theme is images, right? So you guys that are running Amazon, what images do you use? Do you build your own images, or do you just sort of pick an image that's out there already?
I built my own as a base, and I use Puppet to make what I want.
Right. Others? No, just sort of using what's out there. So that's the right way to do it, but there's costs associated with that, right? And it's not true. Do you start with a base image from Amazon?
Sometimes I have, but other times I've gone through the whole thing and created actual images.
And why do you do that? Let me ask.
Because if you use somebody else's base and you build on top of it,
no idea what's in it.
Yeah. Not to mention the fact that they could cycle that out.
Yep.
And then you'll have to do that anyways.
That's right. That's right. And it's particularly important when you're also going to be running the same images on your own private cloud. This is the thing. If you don't know how to build an image, you're never going to be able to run private cloud, because you're never going to be able to make sure that the images match on both sides, right? You can take an image from Amazon and you can, you know, pull that image off of S3 and slap it into your own local private cloud, but, you know, in the words of Obama, you didn't build that. You know, you don't know what's in that. You know, when the rubber hits the road, you need to know what's in there. And the only real way to do that is build it from scratch, right? So, and, you know, so these are the bullet points, right? Trust. You want to know where the bits come from. Reproducibility. You want to be absolutely sure that you can reproduce the exact same image over and over again, right? You want to be able to audit everything that's in it. And these are the things that in Amazon, you know, and other cloud providers that provide their own images, they sort of studiously ignore this problem, right? Because it's, first of all, it's hard to do at that sort of scale, and so it's sort of a problem that they've punted on. And, you know, you'll sometimes be convinced that you don't necessarily need that you can trust who's, you know, I've known a lot of sysadmins in my time, not a trusting lot. Right? So we've got some, you know, there are some tools that we use and tools that we know other people use to do a lot of these. And two of the big ones that you should probably look at are AMI Creator, right? And basically what AMI Creator does is it takes a Kickstart file. So how many of you guys are Red Hat-ish admins? Like I see the guy with the red hat in the middle. So I presume you know some of this stuff. And how many of you have Kickstarts sitting around Okay, so right, so you use kickstarts. You know, if you've built a lot of images, you've got kickstarts lying around, and a lot of the admins I know have kickstarts going back for years. Right, it's the accepted way to do it. So the great thing about AMI Creator is you feed it in a kickstart, and it spits out an Amazon machine image at the other end, and it also spits out an EMI, which is it can be tweaked to spit out an EMI, which is a Eucalyptus machine image. Right. AMI Creator is the tool that we are sort of leaning to now for the production of our own images, largely because we happen to know that Karanbir Singh, who runs the CentOS project, also uses AMI Creator to build CentOS AMIs. And he's here, so if you see him floating around, he's doing all kinds of interesting stuff. If you see the little badge that says Karanbir Singh, you should corner him and ask him, what cool things are you doing with images? Because he's got some really cool projects going on. And that's in GitHub, so you can take a look and see how it works. There's also a project that Red Hat sponsors called BoxGrinder. So if you go to boxgrinder.org, it's a little bit prettier interface. There's a little magic in it that I'm not super comfortable with. It's basically, it's the same principle. It takes Kickstart, but then it's also got some metadata files on the side, and so that's probably worth your time as well to take a look at that. But again, if you don't use tools like this to build your, and how do you build your images, by the way? Do you have any particular tools that you use, or?
The way I did it before was just like I made like a heated file and I copied and unloaded the packages, like installed them as a chroot, I think, and then I went through
right.
so it's been a while.
Yeah, and that's the sort of, that's exactly the kind of thing that AMI Creator basically does for you. So,
and I use the API to upload the images.
Right. Yeah. So, of those of you who are using Amazon, how many of you are using the cloud-init stuff on a regular basis? Okay. So, what are you using cloud-init for?
Pretty basic, just for bootstrapping script.
Right. Right. And that's probably its best purpose when you get right down to it. Right. I first discovered cloud-init when I was running my own systems. I only had a handful of systems. I knew just enough Puppet to be dangerous. And sort of an idiot, and I knew Bash really well, so I just wrote a bunch of Bash scripts instead of building out a full Puppet infrastructure, because I knew I was never going to have more than probably 8 to 10 machines max, and so that's what I would use. And so for those of you who haven't used cloud-init and who aren't familiar with it, it's really pretty awesome, right? When you launch an image in Amazon. And this all started in Amazon, and now it's sort of spreading out to other cloud providers and distros. When you launch an image, you need a way to say, so once this image is turned into an instance, what then? I don't want to have to SSH into it and run a bunch of stuff. I want it to just work, right? And so the way that you invoke that is essentially like this, right? So when you start your instance, you can just feed in a recipe file of some kind, right? So this is, and for those of you who use EC2, you will recognize Yuka run instances is basically identical to the EC2 run instances command, right? These tools are completely right. So the Yuka foo tools and the EC2 foo tools use the same API. It's Bodo underneath. The guy who wrote Bodo worked for Eucalyptus for a long time. Now he works for Amazon. And the reason he works for Amazon is because a bunch of people inside of Amazon started using Yuka tools because they were in the distro, right? So Amazon's like, well, maybe offer that guy a job. So now we have a mole inside of Amazon, so that's awesome. Right, so, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, it's a dead simple thing. It's just like a dumb simple thing. Feed in some script and then it'll run it, right? But it's one of those dead simple things that really makes a whole bunch of other stuff possible, right? So if you're using Amazon and you're not using cloud-init stuff, you should figure it out. Start playing with it. Because the thing is that once you and let me show. So I'll show you. So and the thing about cloud-init is you can feed in a bunch of different stuff, right? You can feed in a YAML manifest that says install these packages, and those syntaxes kind of, you can run shell script in them, but it's sort of, you feed in a list, like a comma delimited list of the command itself. So you end up, if you want to, you know, yum install foo, and you wanted to do it with a command, it would be command like bracket comma yum comma install. It's sort of weird syntax, so I don't like it. And I just feed straight shell script in because it also recognizes that. So sort of a picture of an example of one of these. So, and this is the sort of terrible thing that I would, you know, perpetuate. You know, it's just a shell script that creates a Drupal 6 instance of CentOS 6 from scratch, and it just bootstraps the whole thing, right? And it's god-awful ugly, right? It's hideous. Obviously, you would change all these things, but then, so it uses the Amazon, the AWS metadata service, which is identically matched by Eucalyptus, right? So this script works on both Eucalyptus and AWS. And so you basically pull the host name from the metadata service, set the host name, you know, you install EPEL, you run a bunch of updates, which takes forever, right? So, and this is one way of setting up bootstrapping, but it takes a while, right? So then you need to figure out how to, you know, snapshot this if you're going to be doing it all the time, and speed matters. Start MySQL, do all this stuff, do some terrible things, right? It's all ugly shell script, but it works, right? It works. And it's guaranteed to work anytime you use a given recipe and a given AMI, right? Once it works, it works. And that's super powerful. Of course, and you know, once you know, and the thing is that with this combination, it's really easy to iterate over stuff, right? You can iterate over one of these scripts as you're writing at, you know, the great thing about Amazon or Eucalyptus is that you can just, you run the script, you see if it worked. It didn't, well, you just run it again, create another instance, then create another instance. And at some point, you've got 50 instances at the same time, and they're like, you know, 3 cents an hour, so you don't care, just so long as you remember to shut them all down when you're done, right? When using Amazon, tip, make sure that you're shutting down your test instances, because when they sit around and you forget about them, they cost you a lot of money. Yes, but that takes time, right? So frequently what our users will do is that they will use this process to get to an image that they like, and then they'll just rebundle the whole thing, right? Once they get it to the right point, that then becomes the AMI of record. And then they can start from that AMI, and if they need to make tweaks at installed at real time, they can make those tweaks separately, right? Because if you look at some of this, there's some stuff that you can capture, but there's some stuff you can't. You're always going to need some way of passing in whatever the current full host name is, right? In a cloud system, you need to figure out the host name from the metadata service, or you're not going to know what the externally facing host name is. So that's the kind of thing that you would always be defining, you know, through cloud-init or something similar. And we've got a bunch of these kinds of scripts that we use for building stuff ourselves, right? So we run the Eucalyptus infrastructure on Eucalyptus. And so if you go to GitHub here, to the recipes repo, you'll see a bunch of stuff that we use ourselves, some of which is actually mature and good code, and a lot of it is, you know, the sort of crap that I write. We have real sysadmins now. Yeah, so what I showed you is just awful, right? You don't actually want to, you know, build Drupal images, you know, by yum installing stuff in a bash script, and then, you know, that's what Puppet is for, right? That's what these kinds of pieces of infrastructure are for. And what you do is precisely what you're supposed to do, right? Use this mechanism to bootstrap Puppet on everything, every cloud instance you ever run, right? And so that looks basically like this, you know, blah, blah, blah. He wrote this. That guy right there. Take a bow. Right, same stuff, right? It's just that you yum update everything, and then you make sure you've got the latest version of Puppet from a real repo, and that you're not, you know, you can pull it out of EPEL if you want, but EPEL is not as fast as the Puppet stuff, so you pull it straight from the Puppet repos. You know, you've got the good stuff. You do all the magic you need to do. You update everything. You install Puppet. And then, you know, a simple little manifest to make sure that it's actually running. And you can apply this, and, you know, when you've got a Puppet client, and then, you know, boom, you set up a little manifest that installs HTTP. If you want to put some little cat or something, I think we've got a recipe somewhere that puts up a cat or a little cat or something. Right, so pretty straightforward. So the interesting thing that I have found recently that I think sort of makes a Puppet really interesting as sort of the pivot point for doing real hybrid cloud is the Puppet Cloud Provisioner module. Has anyone looked at that yet? So go look at it, right? If there's one thing that you can take away from this talk, whether you use Eucalyptus or not, if you're using AWS and you're doing Puppet management stuff at scale, you should look at the Cloud Provisioner module, right? Because the thing that it does for you is that it goes out and it sets up, it gives you the tools to go out and automatically instantiate a new instance, automatically bootstrap all that stuff with the necessary Puppet client stuff, automatically make a signature request back, and if you have your server set to auto-sign, which it seems like a lot, how many people have auto, like if you're using Puppet in AWS, do you use auto-sign? So it's
I wrote another kind of API that actually is like another management with Bodo to it that actually keeps the node up and sets the hosting, makes an internal DNS.
Right.
And then signs it or revokes it based off the case, and then loads it in Puppet.
So everybody's got something like that. Either like the lazy approach, which actually, and the nice thing about the permission model around AWS is that you can make sure that only certain nodes are talking. So a lot of people I've talked to, like who went to the Pinterest thing yesterday? So Pinterest, they were in the auditorium and they had this great thing where they were talking about their infrastructure, and they turn auto signing on for everything at Pinterest because they use the IAM stuff to make sure that the only machines that can ever talk to Pinterest hosts come from inside their own infrastructure. So when they get rooted at some point, you'll know why. I don't know. It seems it seems safe to me from but people don't like turning auto signing on. But if you do, or if you have some mechanism like that, if you use Cloud Provisioner, it takes care of all of that for you, right? So you basically say, go make me, and this is, when we talk about auto scaling is nothing more than some set of tools like this, right? And if you've already got Puppet doing a lot of this sort of configuration work, then it's relatively straightforward to leverage that with something like Cloud Provisioner. So take a quick look at what's going on here. This is just the bootstrap for the Cloud Provisioner, and I just want to walk through it to talk a little bit about what the dependencies are and how it works. Yes, all that typical stuff. Okay, so you basically install all the packages you need. You have to install, because right now you have to build a bunch of stuff from source, including libxml, which is painful, but that's all right. If you've got a way to do it, you just do it. So you require the Fog libraries. Does anyone use Fog? So Fog is the Ruby library for various cloud stuff. So this relies on the Fog library. And basically, you just install Fog, and then you install Cloud Provisioner on top of it, right? And so what Fog is a lightweight layer that basically talks at a very high level in the Amazon API, which is what it was built for. So it talks Amazon API, and then there's a plugin model for it to talk to other APIs. We don't need to use the plugin model because we can just use the Amazon API, right? So we can use the native API. And you set it up as a Puppet master. It's probably the simplest configuration. The one that I've played with is where the Puppet master is the same node that Cloud Provisioner is running on. So so all the calls come into the same machine. And then there's a bunch of other stuff to get it working, right? You have to set the path, right? So Puppet help node AWS, so it's called node AWS, that's what you run. There's all sorts of getting started information. You need to authorize port 8140 anywhere you want to use this, right? Yeah, and then been hacking on the AutoSign stuff. And so this is still largely a work in progress. But yeah, so after running this, so this command right here, after installing this recipe, and this recipe is one of the recipes in, so if you go to, I can give you the URL. You take that recipe, you bootstrap this recipe with the same AMI that I'm using right here, and then you use this AMI. That's a command that you can run from this system that will bootstrap you know, a separate instance, load it up with the Puppet client, and bring it back so it immediately, you know, submits the cert, and then when you sign the cert, it's in your list of clients, right? Which is really cool, right? It works, you know, surprisingly well. And it's, I mean, there's a few, it's a fairly new module, right? So it's in the list of Puppet modules, and if you go check it out, it's cool. So, you know, and what makes this easier? Because, I mean, the sort of net of this, if you're producing identical images on both your public cloud and whatever private cloud you're running, that's a requirement to make hybrid cloud work for real. If you're using the same tools to bootstrap everything, so you've got guaranteed provenance on both sides. And identical APIs make this a lot easier, right? When you're using the same API, because there's lots of API portability out there, and people say, well, the API isn't that big a deal. And in the long term, once you have all your tools set up, it's not that big a deal. But in the short term, when you're trying to get something working and there's some API hinkiness, having the same API that works reliably on both sides is really, really, you know, useful and mitigates the pain, right? So, and this is one of the reasons I'm at Eucalyptus, because I used AWS and I played with Eucalyptus, and you know, I loved the idea. And so we signed an agreement with Amazon Web Services in March of this year to continue to work together on API fidelity over time. So go play with Eucalyptus. There's a URL up there at the top, which is our sort of ease of use installer called Silvereye. We don't have a one machine version of it yet. That's coming. Right now you need at least 2 machines, one for the front end and one for the machines where the VMs go, right, the node controller. And we've got a lot of projects on Eucalyptus, so once you start using it, you'll find all kinds of useful little things out there. You should read the documentation. Always read the documentation. And then we're on IRC, pound Eucalyptus. Our message base or knowledge base is engage.eucalyptus.com. So if you have any questions, you can go out there. We also have developer mailing lists and so forth where we do much of our business. So go play with it. It's cool. Okay, so who figured out the acronym? Anyone? Well, that's fine. Who cheated best? Put your hand up. Who cheated best? You, sir. You're the host, so you don't count.
What was that? End user computer application?
No.
No. Computing architecture, linking your programs to useful systems.
That's exactly right. So give me my email address and I'll give you a shirt. So let me say that again. I'll say it from memory. Elastic utility computing architecture, linking your programs to useful systems. So everyone thinks that's a backronym. It's not. It's freaky. So those guys, like, and the company was made by like ridiculous graduate students and their like guru professor, right? So it's this company that, and they're so geeky. And they actually took a long list of words that they thought, what are words that describe what it is that our product does? And they wrote a program that they fed into this so that it would come back and give them a whole bunch of acronyms that could add up to that, and Eucalyptus was the winner, right? So it sounds like a backronym. It's totally not. It was totally designed that way. So that's it. That's my email address. You send me an email and say, I got it right, and don't, what's your name? Eric Melhoff. All right, so I'll remember that, and if any of you lot try to lie and say, I came up with it, you'll suffer the consequences. So what? What?
Consequences of a free shirt?
Yeah, the consequences of not getting a free shirt, and maybe getting called out on Twitter and embarrassed. I don't know. There will be consequences. So I'm on Twitter at GregDK. We're on Twitter at Eucalyptus Cloud. And that's it. We got 5 minutes for Q&A. Yes?
Does Eucalyptus currently support Zen 4, or any plan to support Zen 4 in the future?
Does CentOS 5 have Zen 4? I think the answer is no. Probably not. I mean, mostly we support KVM, we support Zen, older Zen. We support VMware, right? So we've got and that's part of our enterprise product where you can actually get VMware support. But we're mostly focused on KVM.
So I got a question. It's probably a smart idea to follow the biggest cloud provider right now.
Uh-huh.
But that's still kind of betting your entire company on the future of the...
That may be. That may well be. But the fact is that a lot of people are already making that bet, right? So, and this is going to be your own regardless. So you can always just pull stuff off of Amazon and run it on your own equipment if you see fit. And you know, and we're built to support the AWS API for now and so Martin Mikos, our CEO, said tongue-in-cheek, we will be happy to support any API that gets to 50% market share. Right? So by definition, that's one, and that one is AWS. But if Google comes along, you know, if the Google Compute Engine comes along, yeah, you shake your head, but those guys, you know. So, you know, we've got, and it's not, you know, this is. It's not difficult to put an abstraction layer on top, and if some other service provider comes along, I have a feeling we'll see them coming, and we'll have the time to, you know, when there are other APIs that we can pull. And, you know.
I mean, I'm just asking because OpenStack is kind of gaining traction now, and there's another, I just came aware of another cloud provider called Join, who's doing their own thing,
right.
And they're actually
Right.
So that makes it exciting, right? More competitors, more market value.
Yep. So you know, we're keeping our eye on OpenStack, obviously, and they've got lots of corporate members, lots of, you know, momentum. What they don't have is a lot of production deployments at scale, and we have, and it hurts really bad. Right? Because this stuff is not easy. Having a cloud that scales and is stable, it is not beanbag, right? It is serious business. And I think there's an old saying, pioneers get the arrows and settlers get the land, right? And we've got customers that, you know, they are pissed off at us all the time, but we're fixing their problems, right? And so I have a feeling that OpenStack is still a year or two away from going through that process, right? So, but I mean, it's a good point, right? Everyone's talking about the open cloud, and they want to have open providers on the back end and on the front end. You know, our philosophy is more pragmatic. Amazon is the dominant provider now. We want to make sure we provide options to people who are already Amazon users to have their own open source cloud, right? So, different approach. Nice Fedora sticker, by the way. And a Homer Simpson sticker? That's amazing.
Somehow it all came together.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? All right, tweet me maybe. Thank you, everyone.